are you today?
Are these golden beets?
Yes, they are.
Wow, they're gigantic.
Across the city, spring and summer are when farmers markets are busting with fresh greens and reds and purples of newly harvested fruits and vegetables.
Oh, these are red turnips.
These are much milder than those.
These markets connect us city folk to the folks that grow the food on our plates. Visiting one, you can meet some of the people involved with planting, harvesting, and shipping the produce.
I'm going to go harvest some Napa cabbage. Is there any interest in Napa cabbage?
Yeah, of course.
Is that, do you have Napa cabbage?
Okay, yeah.
But I have to go harvest it, so you have to wait a minute.
Yeah,
right?
not a problem.
All right.
I also have beautiful
You can ask them about the varieties you've never seen before and get some advice on how to cook the ingredients you see before you.
I don't know if I would call it sweet. It's not sweet. I usually stir fry it with garlic and olive oil.
And it tastes good.
It's delicious.
Okay, I'll take that.
It's
I'm gonna try
delicious.
it.
Enjoy. Have a good day.
This is Gritty and Green, a podcast for truly urban gardeners. I'm your host and friendly neighborhood master gardener, Meredith Nutting. This week, we're exploring the produce we love to try and grow in our urban gardens. We'll meet some of the folks that provide the food for the market and answer one of your gardening questions. So, let's get growing. Did you know that vegetables don't exist? Well, botanically speaking at least. Tomatoes, those are fruits. Carrots, those are roots. Lettuce, those are leaves. Chickpeas, that's a seed. Celery, that's a stem. And broccoli, well, that's a flower. From a botanical perspective, there is no such thing as a vegetable. But of course, we all know they exist. The word vegetable comes via medieval Latin from the Middle English vegetabilia, meaning growing or flourishing. The first incident of the word vegetable, to refer to plants cultivated for food, an edible herb or root, was in 1767. The modern definition is, according to Merriam-Webster, a usually herbaceous plant such as the cabbage, bean, or potato, grown for an edible part that is usually eaten as part of a meal. And culinarily, we pretty much consider anything with a lower sugar content a vegetable, and anything on the sweeter side a fruit. But that gets tricky. As the Institute of Culinary Education points out on their blog, salsa is considered savory, and the tomatoes in it a vegetable. But what about mango salsa? Or sweet potatoes that fit equally in a soup and a pie? Or rhubarb, which would never be called sweet, but is primarily showcased in summer desserts. There's a lot of gray areas when it comes to what exactly constitutes a vegetable, but just about everyone can agree that getting a variety of them is important to our health. So, have you ever wondered where our modern-day vegetables come from? Back when all people were hunters and gatherers foraging for edible nuts, tubers, leaves, and fruits, certain plants started to become more desirable. They were purposefully planted and cared for, while other plants were removed. This was forest gardening. In fact, this kind of gardening was taking place in the United States before colonizers arrived. Some of these gardens in the Pacific Northwest are still going strong, despite not being tended to in a century. Forest gardening led to plant breeding, selecting certain plants that had the biggest fruits or the sweetest tubers. And eventually, the domestication of crops arose in the Fertile Crescent somewhere around 10,000 before the Common Era. As people moved around the world, they took the plants with them, and the plants were changing. If you've ever taken a biology class, you'll probably have heard of Gregor Mendel. He's the guy that discovered genetics using peas in the mid-1800s. At the time, most scientists thought that genes were passed down via blending. If a red flowering plant is bred with a white flowering plant, you get a pink flower. And in some cases, this is true. But following different traits in peas, Mendel discovered some traits are dominant and some are recessive. In his peas, for example, there are white flowers and purple flowers, but no light purple flowers. So if a baby plant gets one purple gene from one parent and one purple gene from another parent, it will be purple. And if it gets one white gene from one parent and another white gene from another, it will be white. But if it gets one purple gene from one parent and one white gene from the other, it'll be purple. It'll carry the white gene but not show it. In this case, the gene to have white flowers is recessive. The offspring will need to have received 2 of the white flower genes, one from each parent, in order to have white flowers. The dominant purple flower gene, on the other hand, just requires one parent to pass on that color to have offspring with purple flowers. That means that out of 100 pea plants, 75% of them will have purple flowers, and 25% will have white flowers. You can breed the white flowering plants 1,000,000 times and you'll never come up with a purple flowering pea plant. This is known as a variety. It's the same species of plant as the purple pea. It can breed with it, but it is white versus the more common purple. Varieties are naturally occurring variations within a species. This basic understanding of genetics and our greater understanding of chromosomes and DNA that came after changed modern agriculture forever. But even before people knew what genes were, they were genetically modifying plants to suit their needs. One of the most intriguing examples is Brassica oleracea. Known commonly as wild mustard, wild Brassica oleracea came from the Mediterranean and is a tall perennial plant with a circle of huge leaves. In its second year, it's a biennial, so it works on a 2-year cycle, it shoots up a woody stalk with clusters of yellow flowers. As ancient Greeks and Romans planted the wild mustard in their gardens, they began selecting seeds for plants that grew more leaves. Over many generations of selecting the plants in their garden that grew the most leaves and saving seeds from those plants and then planting them the following year and repeating it and repeating it and repeating it, the plant changed what it looks like to be more like the kale or the collards you may eat today. And then the farmers started to choose plants that grew huge leaf buds, where all the leaves were condensed tightly in a ball. And we got cabbages. Starting with the smooth-leafed green and red, and then later the crinkly, crisp Savoy. Selecting for smaller leaf buds that grow up the thick stalk, we start to get Brussels sprouts, though they may or may not have originated in Brussels. In fact, a lot of the origins of each of these varieties is up for dispute, but the process was still the same. Farmers also started to choose plants that had big, dense flower heads on top of thick stalks. This would be the green broccoli, light green fractals of Romanesco, and white cauliflower. And in China, they were doing the same thing. So we've got Chinese broccoli or kale with smaller flower heads and larger leaves and a slightly more bitter flavor. Farmers also started selecting for thicker stalks, like a kale version of a turnip. A large, almost spherical stem, tasting sweeter than broccoli, became known as kohlrabi. All of these different plants are the same species. We can differentiate them by referring to their variety. There are 8 groups. Acephala. That's the one that most closely resembles wild mustard. Those are your kales and collards. Alba glabra, mostly found in Asian cuisines like the Chinese kale and broccoli. Italica, that's the Northern European broccoli. Botrytis, the light-colored flowers of cauliflower and Romanesco. Capitata, which is Latin for forming a head and consists of the cabbages green, red, and Savoy. Gemifera, Brussels sprouts. Gongolodes, which is kohlrabi. And Troncuda, which includes Portuguese cabbage and sea kale. But that's not all. You can breed more and more specific cultivars within each variety. Purple cauliflower, for example, is known as Brassica oleracea variety Botrytis violet queen. And you can hybridize between the groups. Take broccolini. That's a cross between the European Broccoli italica and the Chinese broccoli Abu glabra. You can see it written Brassica oleracea variety italica cross Abu glabra. Not only that, but there's a whole other brassica plant, Brassica rapa, that went through the same kind of process. From that plant, we get turnips, Napa cabbage, bok choy, rapini, and rapeseed oil. So much variety just by prioritizing one part of the plant over another. Just about all the plants we eat have been modified from their wild ancestor, either by selective breeding, by prioritizing different traits, or crossbreeding different varieties together. And there's a good reason why. I've seen it firsthand. Actually, you can too. This fall, go track down pawpaws. If you haven't heard of pawpaws, they're a native understory tree with a unique fruit. Philadelphia is at the northern part of their distribution. They're kind of like a creamy, custardy, banana, mango, tropical-esque fruit native to the mid-Atlantic. These pawpaws need to ripen on the tree, and they are very soft when fully ripe, making them hard to transport. All of this to say they're kind of special to us here in the mid-Atlantic. You're not going to find them other places. They ripen in September, and you can actually go out to the forest and find wild pawpaws. Driving a bit west of here, you can usually find some of the wild ones for sale at the ends of people's driveways. You can also find cultivated pawpaws. There are even some festivals. Try and get your hands on one of each, a wild and a cultivated. And you'll see that the wild pawpaws, though delicious, are smaller with at least twice, if not 3 times the number of big brown seeds as the cultivated pawpaws. Plants create the fruit, whether it be a banana, a watermelon, or pawpaws, to entice animals to come and eat the seeds and spread them. Plants want a big seed-to-fruit ratio in order to reproduce successfully. Humans want plants to have a big fruit-to-seed ratio in order to maximize the food that they get to eat. So most of our cultivated food crops have maximized fruit and minimized the seeds, to the point where we have things like seedless watermelon. By the way, seedless watermelon came from crossing a male and a female watermelon with different number of chromosomes or genes. It's kind of like crossing a horse and a donkey to create a mule. The horse and donkey can breed, but they have a different number of chromosomes, so the mule that they produce cannot. This kind of crossbreeding produces a sterile hybrid. You can't breed 2 mules and get another mule. You have to breed a horse and a donkey. Same with the watermelons. And that's obvious because the offspring of watermelon are seedless. They're not going to be able to plant more seeds. A lot of people think that these seedless watermelons somehow come from a lab somewhere. And that brings us to the phrase genetically modified organisms, or GMO. And this is a very controversial topic. We are all benefiting from plants that have had a human hand in their gene selection. Natural evolution wouldn't have selected many of these varieties when it comes to rewarding the fittest to reproduce and getting rid of the weak. What people have done over thousands and thousands of years in agriculture is creating genetically modified organisms. But typically when we're talking about GMOs, we're not talking about the lengthy process of changing plants over generations and generations. We're really talking about genetic engineering. This is when plants or animals or fungus have new gene combinations from biotechnological approaches. That could be gene editing or manipulating the DNA by deleting or inserting or silencing genes to create an organism that is subgenic. It's just manipulating its own DNA that exists already. Or it could be moving a piece of DNA from one species into the DNA of another closely related species, creating a cisgenic organism. Or it can be combining DNA from 2 species that are not closely related, resulting in a transgenic organism. Sometimes it's to reduce pesticide use, like in Bt cotton, where a gene from a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, Bt, is inserted in the cotton's DNA, and it gives it a resistance to bollworm. or in golden rice, where genes from daffodils and a soil bacteria are inserted so that the rice plant produces more beta-carotene, which helps vitamin A deficiency in some of the world's poorest people. There are some good reasons that we genetically modify plants: fewer pesticides, greater yield, better nutritional value, and even flavor. And there's a good reason to be skeptical of them. I'm not talking about the ideas that consuming GMO plants can cause allergic reactions or cancer because of their DNA makeup. There's no scientific evidence to back that up. But I am talking about how they are used in this country. Something like 80% of the processed foods Americans eat are GMO. In fact, over 90% of the corn planted in America is GMO. And America leads the world in GMO crops with 74.4 million hectares growing genetically modified plants every year. The European Union is more cautious with GMO cultivation. This is mainly because people are nervous of the perceptive risks, but also because of real environmental concerns and risks to local farmers. 4 corporations control 60% of the global seed supply. One of the biggest was Monsanto, until they were bought by Bayer. Monsanto developed and patented a weed killer, glyphosate, aka Roundup. Then they developed and patented crops that could withstand applications of Roundup. You can spray Roundup over fields and not kill the crops you were growing as long as they were from Monsanto seeds. Despite what these companies may tell you, glyphosate can stay in the environment for months, contaminating our soil and water. Long-term exposure can cause liver and kidney damage, male infertility, and neurological damage to animals and humans. It's been labeled as a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization. So, staying away from GMOs can help lower pesticide exposure. Studies have shown that folks that eat primarily organic foods have 90% less pesticides in their bodies. And if you can't afford to go totally organic, prioritize organic grains like wheat, flours, cereals, and breads. So, pesticide exposure is one reason to avoid GMOs. Another is to protect farmers. Remember those 4 companies that own most of the seeds? Well, they have patents on them, and farmers are contracted to buy the seeds directly from those companies. They aren't allowed to save seeds from one year to the next, and surprise, surprise, those seeds aren't cheap. And let's say you want to buy seeds from another seed provider at some point. You could get sued by the GMO company that you signed a contract with. And then let's say you're a neighboring farmer growing a non-GMO kind of corn next to a field of GMO corn. And let's say the wind blows and the pollen from the GMO corn lands on your corn. Well, now your corn is contaminated with GMO genes. You can't sell it as organic. And then there's the pesticide use. As more and more glyphosate was sprayed, the weeds that it targeted evolved to resist it. Since 1998, at least 24 Roundup-resistant weeds have evolved. So, Monsanto developed seeds that could resist another herbicide, dicamba. That herbicide has a tendency to drift onto neighboring farms. In 2017, across 20 states, over 2,200 farmers lost hundreds of millions of dollars in crops due to neighboring farms using dicamba. Smaller family farms are no match for huge billion-dollar companies. With so much of our global food production in the hands of a few powerful companies looking out for shareholders, GMOs do start to feel toxic and scary. And finally, there's the question of monocultures. When almost everything we plant is basically genetically identical, we're getting ourselves into trouble. Life on Earth relies on evolution. Evolution relies on survival of the fittest. If the climate warms, the plants that can sustain higher temperatures and droughts survive and pass on their genes. The species becomes stronger. And while monoculture farming started to become commonplace before GMOs were on the scene, they have certainly not made it better. We have lost 75% of our food plant diversity in the last 100 years. Just 9 species make up 66% of our global crop production. We are vulnerable right now. If these crops become decimated from pest or disease or climate change, a lot of people are going to go hungry. It's happened before. Hundreds of years ago, potatoes, native to South America, became a sole staple for more than a third of Ireland. So, in 1845, when a disease infected 3/4 of the potato crop over 7 years, it was devastating. The Great Famine in Ireland saw 1 million people starve and 1 million more leave Ireland as refugees. Was there enough food to feed the Irish? For sure. Ireland was actually exporting a lot of food to the UK during that time. That's a bigger story. Eventually, crop breeding found new potato varieties that were resistant to the mold strain that caused the blight. But the effects of that famine are long-lasting. So genetic diversity in our food is important for our survival, but also our enjoyment. What's more fun than discovering the flavor of an apple variety you've never tried before? Or planting 2 tomato varieties in your garden and finding the next year they crossbred into an even more flavorful type? Or going to the farmer's market and discovering that carrots come in not just orange, but their original yellow and purple.
Beets. You see this?
Yeah.
This is the original color carrots came in. Wow. Didn't start this way. We made it this way.
Get out of here.
We made it this way.
It's the best thing. I try with carrots.
Now, do you want these kind? Or?
No, I want the one that's how they are supposed to be like that. I'll take that. Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
The farmers market held every Tuesday and Thursday is the Sanctuary Farm Stand at 22nd and Cecil B. Moore in North Philadelphia. It was founded along with the Sanctuary Farm by Andrea Vittori.
So I'm a nurse practitioner by profession. I've been a nurse probably for close to 30 years now. Have always loved, and I've always worked with people who have lived on the margins in the entirety of my nursing career. And most recently, as I became a nurse practitioner, I worked with what are called federally qualified health centers. So health centers that are serve people either low income or no insurance, underinsured.
Federally qualified health centers are like safety nets. They are often nonprofit or city-run and have many services, medical, dental, and mental health for all ages, all in one spot, regardless of insurance or ability to pay. There are about 40 across the city of Philadelphia. And on top of immediate health care, these facilities also provide education and social services.
As a nurse, we take sort of this holistic approach to healing, right? We look at the whole person. So it's not just treating your diabetes, it's looking at your emotional health, the health of your environment, your family background, all of that. There's this large world of things that impact people's health beyond what happens within that 15 minutes or so that we have in the exam room.
Keeping the visits short allows healthcare workers to see more patients, but it makes it hard to get to the root of illnesses.
So my patients, were food insecure. They were unemployed. They were underemployed. They were homeless. Or they lacked proper education to get a good paying job. So there were all of these things that were impacting my patients' health, not to mention the mental health that either underlay those problems or as a result of those issues. And we weren't really addressing it. And it just became more and more frustrating for me.
Having grown up in the suburbs with a love of nature, Andrea started spending more and more time gardening and even became a master gardener.
I started a couple of community gardens, taught gardening in a homeless shelter, and began to realize, that beyond the food that we produce, there's this health that happens just as a result of getting your hands in the soil, working with other people, being outside, and learning a new skill. And so this idea percolated for a number of years of creating a space in the city, in a neighborhood that is food insecure, that can provide the nutrition that people need, but beyond that also provide an environment that helps promote people's holistic health. So that's sort of the background to Sanctuary Farm.
The farm broke ground on Mother's Day in 2017. In the first year, they were able to harvest 1,082 pounds of produce. Over the years, Sanctuary Farm expanded on several more lots as demand for produce grew.
It's all within a 4-block or so radius. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lots that we grow on in those areas, most of which are owned by other people. We do, in fine Philly tradition, squat on a couple of lots, and we're trying to acquire them as most community gardens are trying to do as well.
Through Nursing Connections, Andrea was able to partner with Project Home and use some of their empty lots to grow vegetables. But she also worked on getting lots to farm on through the city's land bank.
So we piece them together here and there as best we can. I know other people have had struggles with the land bank. It's a long process. It's a tedious process, but in the end, if you can hang in there, we've been pretty successful. There really isn't any huge trick other than just being persistent. I come from a long line of stubborn Italians, so it helps. We also have a satellite location out in Huntington Valley because, our numbers are growing.
Using a generous landowner's backyard, Sanctuary Farm was able to up their production, planting slow-growing crops 15 miles north of their original farms. And in 2024, Sanctuary Farm harvested nearly 10,000 pounds of food that year. And most of that was given out at the farm stand. Unlike a farmer's market, the Sanctuary Farm stand offers fresh, locally grown produce free to the community.
We don't grow a lot of, kind of cutting edge produce that you might see in fancy farmers markets. Our folks are all about getting food that they are familiar with and can grow. So we do try to push the edges a little bit and introduce folks to new stuff, but we try to listen to the people in the community and what they want. And one of the biggest feedback that we get from folks is how good our produce tastes. Because, we pick our food either the morning of or the day before. And so it is fresh as fresh can be. And that makes a huge difference, not only in the taste, but also in the amount of nutrients that are still in that particular produce item.
Having fresh local produce is important. Every day that passes, fruits and vegetables lose nutritional content. And in a country with high food insecurity, it's important that every piece of produce is providing as much nutrients as it can.
People don't understand food insecurity is more than just not having money to purchase food. It's about where the food is located. It's about whether or not you have the resources to get to the food store. Is there a place even within a mile? There wasn't a grocery store in our neighborhood until just a couple of years ago. So it's more than just the purchasing power. Do you have the pots and the pans to even prepare the food? Do you know how to prepare the food in a healthy way? If you're going to a food pantry, do they even have fresh vegetables? If they have fresh vegetables, are they culturally appropriate? So there's so many factors that go into food security that people don't think about.
Since its opening in 2017, Sanctuary Farm has given away 35,000 pounds of fresh, locally grown produce to over 1,500 families.
We have new people every month. We have new visitors to come to the farm stand, but the core of the people that come, we have about 450 individuals that are regular individuals, and we know them, they know us. We'll pull up to the farm stand with a truckload of produce, and the guys that hang out on the corner come over right away and help us unload. Neighbors are supportive and helpful. We've developed relationships with people, and that's just been wonderful to watch that program grow, and to see the same people coming back week after week after week and giving us feedback and telling us, so when we learn stuff, we have folks that come by and say, you can actually eat these leaves of this crop. And so we say, here, take some home, cook it, bring it back. And they'll not only come back and tell us how it was, they'll come back with a sample, People bring by baked goods that they've baked for us. It's like one big family. There's something about doing it outdoors and actually physically in the neighborhood. If we had a building, it wouldn't be the same. Because we're talking to people as they're walking by, waiting at the bus stop. We're getting to see the kids. We have a little dog that, the kids just love. So it really has such a great community feel to it. And I love it.
The farm stand doesn't just give away fresh, healthy produce. It also provides some free medical services.
We do blood pressure screenings at our stand, and we're right next door to a health center. So if someone has an elevated pressure that is urgently needs to be addressed, we can send them right over to the health center. We do hands-only CPR training as well, and we do a number of other things throughout the year. We've actually done mammogram screenings there, done health fairs. So it's more than just giving out produce, but that's kind of our biggest program. And then our next largest program is our therapeutic gardening program.
The 5-year-old program is a collaboration with the Philadelphia Veterans Administration Clinic to help any community members experiencing behavioral health challenges, but specifically veterans.
And we have a lot of the same folks that have been coming for that entire time. It's a group of men and women who gather once a week. It can be anyone struggling with anything from just loneliness, depression, anxiety to PTSD. And they gather, we meet, we do a little sharing in the morning, we have a little input, some reflection time, and then we all work in the garden, whatever needs to be done.
Gardening is known to have many health benefits. Just being out in the sun lowers blood pressure, and being surrounded by greenery lowers cortisol levels. And then add in working physically side by side with others who may have shared experiences. There's no wonder why nations are studying gardening as a potential treatment to their soldiers' post-traumatic stress disorders.
They'll help us with harvesting, with planting, with cleaning up debris, whatever. And then at the end of the morning session, we come back and we share a lunch together. So it's a wonderful program. And some people have said that, in terms of therapy, it has helped them more than any other therapeutic program they've been in.
The Farm Stand and the Therapeutic Garden are two of the biggest programs at Sanctuary Farm. But there are others, lots of them, like the Veggie RX program.
We provide the health center with prescriptions, vouchers essentially, that the providers give to the patient, and they can use those vouchers to redeem produce.
And Sanctuary Farm hosts Project Home Summer Camp.
Friday, they bring the kids here, and we teach them all things gardening, nature, composting, and so we've got kids that come out that are initially afraid to get their feet dirty, and then they're handling worms by the end of it and having a lot of fun.
For older kids, they have the Summer Scholars.
We match kids from a local prep school and kids from this neighborhood. So we've got kids from very different backgrounds coming together, all learning about this community, some of the struggles that this community is experiencing, things around food insecurity, housing issues, redlining, and then environmental security as well. And what are the consequences of that?
And then there's the workforce program with Project Home.
They're recruiting kids that are at risk of homelessness and then giving them jobs in various places. So we would take, a couple of those kids every summer. And basically they were just learning entry-level job skills. Showing up to work on time, conducting yourself appropriately, all of those soft skills that, most of us take for granted. That then has grown into this idea of having the apprenticeship and so now what we're going to do is recruit those high school students who specifically are interested in learning of some farming skills. by the time they graduate high school, if they don't want to go to college, they have at least some marketable skills in farming. And if they do want to go to college and they do want to pursue an agricultural degree, they have a much better chance of getting accepted. So that's what we're hoping to do. We're in the planning stages of that right now. And we have various other classes. So we have nutrition classes, we have heart healthy classes, we teach gardening classes, farming classes. I'm going to be doing a beekeeping class. We're partnering with Half Mad Honey, and they do bee therapy actually. Lots of different programming. We're teaching sewing classes in a few weeks, all with this eye towards the environment. So the sewing classes are not about, making a prom dress. It's about, how do you patch up a pair of jeans that's ripped so that, you can save money and not have to buy a new pair. How do you darn socks? Those sorts of things. So that's a smattering of some of the programs that we offer.
One last class to mention are the cooking classes. Not only do they do workshops like the upcoming Taste of African Heritage cooking series, but they also do food demonstrations at the farm stand.
We do cooking demos at the farm stand, hand out recipe cards, teach people how to, cook various vegetables in a healthy manner. It's often introducing people to new produce. Even if you're a meat eater, it's better to have a variety of produce, rather than one or two things. So it's nice to be able to teach people, to try something new. I like to do actual cooking demos. So have a hot plate out there and a skillet or just putting a salad together. And then we give out samples as people are coming and going. The most important thing that I tell anybody that is doing our demos is to keep it simple. So simple ingredients. Nothing that, is hard for them to find in the grocery store or expensive, And then also something that if they have to take home and cook, they can cook it with a simple pot, a pan, a skillet, that they don't need fancy equipment.
All of these programs centered at the Sanctuary Farm and Stand are creating a holistic approach to improving the health and well-being of the folks in the community.
We had a woman that came to our stand once, and she said that our program was helping her become more healthy. And then she added at the end of this, which really stopped me in my tracks. She said, you all are not just feeding us, you're healing us. And I thought, well, that's it. That's what we're trying to do. So if that's happening, that's wonderful. For people to be able to walk on grass, to be able to look at flowers growing, to see nature in and around the area where they live, I think it puts us back in touch with who we are and where we've come from. You can't, I don't think you can grow and be successful and healthy if you don't have access to nature, some kind of access to nature. So I think that's part of why urban farming is becoming more and more popular and growing so much. To see somebody who's never grown a plant before, plant a seed, have it grow, have them care for it, and then, harvest it and prepare it and eat it. Like that whole circle, that closed circle, and to watch and witness how it's changed them is amazing. And I think we need more of that in the cities.
That was Andrea Vittoria, the Executive Director of Sanctuary Farm in North Philadelphia. If you want to learn more about the farm and their programming, visit sanctuaryfarmphila.org and find them on Instagram and Facebook. I'll put links to all of those in the show notes. And if you haven't heard the Gritty and Green episode with Half Mad Honey from last season, go back and have a listen. Okay, now for one of your gardening questions. It's a big one. What food can I plant in my small Philly yard? I get asked this a lot at the start of the season by new gardeners looking to stretch their green thumbs and try something new. The short answer is anything. Just about any vegetable can be grown, even in a pot. As long as you have adequate sun, you can even do tomatoes and peppers in containers. If you have a place to trellis, you can do peas or squash. But my usual answer is to go with herbs. Herb gardens get you the most bang for your buck. It's probably the only food that when you grow it yourself, it saves you money. Typically, recipes only call for a sprig or two at a time. Purchasing them at the grocery store gets you way too much, and probably a lot of it will go to waste in your fridge. But being able to go outside and cut a few sprigs off your thyme plant, or pick a few leaves from your basil, not only gets you the exact amount you need, it also encourages your plant to grow more. That's right, the more you cut from it, the more it will grow. It's kind of magical that way. Another reason I suggest this is because while you may be able to grow some great heirloom tomatoes, if they don't get eaten by squirrels, you've provided yourself with 1 or 2 meals. But with herbs, you can give yourself the gift of garden to table over and over again as you add them to your favorite dishes. And then, at the end of the season, you can harvest a bunch to dry for your winter pantry. It's really the garden gift that keeps on giving. Let me know what kind of herbs you love to grow. And if you have a garden question of your own, email me at grittyandgreen@coolgoonproductions.com. Thanks so much for joining me to discover the vast world of vegetables. And a special thanks to Andrea Vittori and the folks at Sanctuary Farm. I'll be back next week with an all-new episode of Gritty and Green. Gritty and Green is presented by Green Philly in collaboration with Cool Goon Productions. It was written, directed, and edited by me, Meredith Nutting. Theme music by Kazuya. If you want more information about local sustainability, go to greenphl.com.